February 27, 1942. Brunneville, Normandy coast. Night. The Channel wind cuts like a blade as Lieutenant John, Jack, Frost presses his face closer to the damp earth. Ahead of him, barely visible in the moonlight, the German radar station squats on the cliff top, angular alien, humming faintly like something alive. The sound isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. To Frost and to Britain, it's the sound of defeat waiting to happen. Somewhere inside that compound, a Wuisberg radar array is turning slowly, its dish sweeping the sky. Every rotation marks another British bomber potentially detected, tracked, and destroyed. The Luftwaffe's night fighters depend on it. And tonight, a handful of British commandos have come not to blow it up, but to steal it. Or rather, steal the man who understands it. Frost flexes his fingers inside his gloves. They are numb from cold, but his mind is sharp. Behind him, scattered across the frozen fields and hedgerows, men of C Company, 2nd Parachute Battalion, lie waiting. Their parachute drops were messy. The wind over Normandy was worse than expected. Some men landed hard. Others landed far off target. One man is already dead, his neck broken on impact, a reminder that this operation is costing lives before a single shot has been fired. Above them, the RAF is gone now. The bombers that thundered overhead minutes earlier were not there to destroy the site, only to distract, to confuse German ears and eyes. The real fight is down here, on the ground in the dark. Frost glances at his watch. The timetable is unforgiving. The Royal Navy will only wait so long at the extraction point below the cliffs. If they miss the rendezvous, the Commandos will be trapped deep in occupied France, surrounded by German forces. He raises his hand. The signal moves silently down the line. Move. The men rise and advance, boots sinking softly into wet grass. Sten guns are cradled close, fingers resting outside triggers. Faces are blackened. Breaths are controlled. No one speaks. The radar station grows larger with every step. Inside the compound, Oberjefreiter Heinrich Wenzel is bored. He is a technician, not an infantryman. His war is dials, voltages, cathode ray tubes. He adjusts a control knob and watches the green line sweep across the screen. Another pass. Another empty sky. He thinks briefly of Hamburg, of his wife, of the letter he hasn't answered. Radar duty on the French coast feels safe. Too safe. The first shot comes from the darkness like a crack of lightning. A German sentry near the perimeter jerks backward and collapses, his rifle clattering onto concrete. Almost instantly, the silence shatters. Shouts in German. A flare streaks upward, bathing the compound in harsh white light. Las. Frost yells, the moment for stealth gone. The commandos surge forward. Grenades arc through the air and detonate with blunt, concussive thumps. Glass shatters. Metal screams. German soldiers scramble from huts, some half-dressed, some clutching rifles, others frozen in shock at the sudden appearance of enemies who were not supposed to exist on this coast. Frost barrels through the gate, Sten gun barking in short, controlled bursts. A German soldier goes down. Another ducks behind a concrete wall. The radar tower looms above them now, skeletal steel against the night sky, cables vibrating from nearby explosions. Inside the operations room, Wenzel doesn't run. He stares at the door as it bursts open, splintering inward. British soldiers flood the room, their weapons alien, their voices sharp and urgent. Hands up, Hind Hawk. Wenzel raises his arms, heart hammering. He knows immediately that this is not a normal raid. These men are looking at the equipment, at him, with a different intensity. One of them grabs his sleeve, yanks him forward. You're coming with us. Outside, the fight is already shifting. German resistance stiffens as troops from nearby positions respond. Machine gun fire rakes the compound. Bullets spark off metal supports. A commando drops, wounded, dragged back by his mates. And all the while, time is bleeding away. Down on the beach below the cliffs, Royal Navy landing craft bob in the surf, engines idling, crews staring up into the darkness. They can't hear the gunfire now. They know what it means. On the cliff top, Frost locks eyes with his men, and then with the terrified German technician being hauled through the smoke. This is it. The point of no return. February 27, 1942. Bruneville Radar Station. Minutes later, Lieutenant John Frost grips the shoulder strap of Oberjefreiter Heinrich Wenzel and shoves him forward through drifting smoke. The German technician stumbles, boots slipping on shattered concrete. Around them, the fight is collapsing inward, British commandos pulling back, Germans pressing harder with every second. This was never meant to be a prolonged battle. Captain C.W.F. Gus March Phillips, commander of the raiding force, shouts orders above the gunfire. The Wuisburg radar has been partially dismantled. Critical components, feed horns, waveguides, electronic modules, are already being hauled away by Royal Air Force radar expert Flight Sergeant C. W. H. Cox, who risked everything to parachute in with the commandos. His hands move fast, precise, ripping secrets from the heart of German technology while bullets snap overhead. But the most valuable component of all is walking, half-dragged, between two paratroopers. Wenzel doesn't know it yet, but he has become cargo. A German machine gun opens up from the far end of the compound, hammering the night. Dirt and sparks leap from the ground. Frost ducks instinctively, hauling Wenzel down with him. Move now. Frost roars. The withdrawal begins. Commandos fall back in small groups, covering each other in short, brutal bursts. The discipline is sharp. This is not a rout. This is practiced violence under pressure. Still, casualties are mounting. One man screams as a bullet tears into his leg. Another doesn't get up at all. German reinforcements are coming. Frost can hear trucks in the distance, engines revving, doors slamming. The radar site, once isolated, is waking up the entire coastline. The path to the cliffs is narrow, funneling the men into exposed ground. Tracer fire slashes across the darkness. Someone yells that they're taking fire from the left. Frost pivots, fires blindly into shadow, and then keeps moving. Wenzel's mind is unraveling. He had been trained to believe in German control of the air, in the invisible shield of radar and fighters that protected the Reich. Now British soldiers are dragging him across French soil, speaking English over the roar of gunfire, treating his most secret equipment like salvage. He realizes, with a cold certainty, that this raid was designed around him. Not the radar tower. Not the guns. Him. At the cliff edge, the ground drops away into blackness. Below, waves crash against the rocks, white foam flashing in the moonlight. Somewhere down there, the Royal Navy is waiting, or preparing to leave. Ropes. March Phillips shouts. Lines are thrown over the edge. Commandos begin their descent, sliding down steep paths and improvised ropes, boots scraping stone. It is chaos, but controlled chaos. Men pause only long enough to provide cover, firing upward at silhouettes moving along the ridge. Frost goes last. He pushes Wenzel ahead of him, gripping the rope with one hand and the German's collar with the other. The descent is brutal. Rocks tear at gloves. The rope burns palms raw. Above them, German soldiers reach the cliff edge and fire down blindly, muzzle flashes flaring like lightning. A round snaps past Frost's head. Another punches into the rock inches from his shoulder. At the bottom, commandos fan out onto the beach, forming a defensive perimeter. Landing craft loom through the spray, ramps already lowering. Naval ratings wave frantically, urging them on. Hurry it up, we're drawing fire. German flares bloom overhead, turning the beach into a pale, ghostly stage. Mortar rounds begin to fall inland, thudding into the cliffs above. The Germans are close now, far closer than planned. Wenzel is shoved onto the ramp of a landing craft. He collapses against the metal floor, lungs burning, hands shaking uncontrollably. He looks up just in time to see Frost jump aboard, followed by the last covering troops. Go, go, go. The ramp slams shut. Engines roar. The landing craft lurches backward into the surf as machine gun fire rattles harmlessly against its steel sides. Water sprays in through gaps, soaking boots and trousers. From the beach, German soldiers arrive seconds too late, firing into the retreating darkness. The channel opens up around the craft, cold and vast. Other boats appear, silhouettes weaving through the waves, carrying wounded men and precious cargo. Above them, RAF fighters begin to circle, shepherding the raiders home. Inside the landing craft, Frost finally allows himself to breathe. He looks down at Wenzel, curled against the bulkhead, eyes wide with shock. "You're safe," Frost says, not kindly, not cruelly. Just a fact. Wenzel doesn't understand the words, but he understands the tone. His war has changed irrevocably. Behind them, the French coast recedes into darkness. Ahead lies England, and interrogation rooms and diagrams and questions he never imagined answering. The radar war has just tilted. February 28, 1942. Southern England. Pre-dawn. The landing craft slams against the shingle with a hollow thud. Cold air rushes in as the ramp drops, carrying the smell of salt, oil, and wet steel. British boots hit English soil, familiar ground finally, but no one celebrates. Men stumble forward, dragging wounded comrades, faces hollow with exhaustion. Medics rush in, voices low and urgent. Obergefreiter Heinrich Wenzel is guided, not roughly now but firmly, away from the beach. A blanket is thrown over his shoulders. A mug of something hot is pressed into his hands. The kindness unsettles him more than the gunfire ever did. Within hours, he is deep inland, seated alone under harsh electric light. The room is plain. A table. 2 chairs. A clock ticking loudly on the wall. Wenzel stares at his reflection in the polished surface of the tabletop and barely recognizes himself. Salt crusts his uniform. His hands still shake. The door opens. Wing Commander Edward "Ted" Jones of the Royal Air Force steps inside, followed by a man in civilian clothes carrying a thick folder. Jones is polite, calm. His German is flawless. "Good morning, Obergefreiter Wenzel," Jones says, sitting down. "You had an eventful night." Wenzel swallows. He nods. There is no shouting, no threats. That is what frightens him most. Jones begins gently. "Where were you trained? How long had you been assigned to Bruneville? What equipment did you maintain?" Wenzel answers cautiously at first, sticking to basics. He assumes this is about troop strength, coastal defenses, maybe invasion fears. Then Jones opens the folder. Inside are photographs, aerial shots of the Wuisburg installation, diagrams sketched with meticulous care. Components laid out on tables. The very pieces Flight Sergeant Cox ripped from the radar set hours earlier. Jones taps one image lightly. "Tell me about the lobe switching unit," he says. Wenzel freezes. This is not a fishing expedition. They already know more than they should. He looks up, eyes searching Jones's face for deception. There is none. For months, British radar operators have been dying in the night sky, picked off by German fighters guided by unseen hands. And now, those hands are being mapped finger by finger. Wenzel begins to talk. He explains how Wuisburg tracks aircraft with unnerving precision, how it can distinguish individual bombers, how it feeds data to searchlights and flak batteries, how night fighters are vectored in until they are close enough to see exhaust flames. As he speaks, RAF intelligence officers behind one-way glass take furious notes. Engineers sketch diagrams. Signals officers exchange glances that border on disbelief. This is the missing piece. Meanwhile, in another building, Flight Sergeant Cox spreads the captured components across a workbench. He works with the intensity of a surgeon racing against time, reassembling the enemy's secrets from fragments. Every part Wenzel describes confirms Cox's findings. Every confirmation sharpens the picture. By morning, a pattern emerges, and with it, a solution. British scientists realize that German radar is powerful, but not invincible. It can be deceived, confused, overloaded. A new idea gains traction, scattering strips of aluminum foil, window, they will later call it, to flood enemy screens with false echoes. The implications are enormous. For the first time since the bombing war began, Britain may be able to blind the Luftwaffe. Wenzel senses the shift in the room before anyone tells him. The questions become more technical, more focused, less about what Germany has, more about how it can be broken. At one point, Jones leans back and studies him. "You understand," he says quietly, "that what you've told us will save lives." Wenzel says nothing. He thinks of Hamburg again, of the radar dish turning slowly against the night sky, of how invulnerable it once felt. Across the channel, the German response is immediate and furious. At Bruneville, officers swarm the shattered radar site. Reports are sent to Berlin. How did the British know? Why did they take components instead of destroying everything? Why was a technician missing? Hitler himself demands answers. The conclusion is chilling. British commandos can strike anywhere, at any time, with precision. Radar stations along the coast are reinforced. Guards doubled. Orders issued to fight to the death. But the damage is already done. The secret is no longer German. Weeks later, British bombers fly again over occupied Europe. This time, something is different. German radar operators stare at their screens in confusion. The sky blooms with phantom aircraft. Signals overlap and multiply. Night fighters scramble in the wrong directions. Flak fires blindly into empty darkness. Bombers pass through. In a quiet room in England, Wenzel listens to the distant drone of engines overhead and understands, fully now, why he was taken alive. The war in the air has changed course, not with a massive battle, but with a handful of men, a cold beach, and a technician who knew too much. Spring 1942. Berlin. Reich Air Ministry. The mood inside the conference room is brittle, edged with anger. Maps of the French coast are spread across a long table, red circles marking radar sites, black arrows tracing British bomber routes. Officers of the Luftwaffe stand rigidly at attention as senior commanders argue in clipped, furious bursts. One word keeps returning, spoken with disbelief and then rage. Bruneville. The raid is no longer a rumor. Reports have been confirmed. Photographs studied. Interrogations conducted. Of German guards who survived, of officers who arrived too late, of coastal commanders who cannot explain how British troops appeared out of the night and vanished again into the sea. A radar technician is missing. Critical components are gone. For Hermann Goering, this is not merely a tactical loss. It is humiliation. The Wurzburg system was supposed to give Germany mastery of the night sky. Instead, it has exposed a terrifying truth. British intelligence understands German radar far better than anyone believed possible. Orders go out immediately. Radar stations are to be hardened. Concrete bunkers thickened. Defensive positions expanded. Troops are told explicitly that surrender is unacceptable. Any future raid must be annihilated on the beaches. But these measures are reactive, and the war is already moving faster than German bureaucracy can respond. Across the Channel, in Britain, the lessons of Operation Biding are being applied with ruthless efficiency. At RAF Bomber Command, aircrew receive new instructions. Strange ones. Bundles of thin aluminum strips are loaded onto aircraft. Pilots are told when and when not to drop them. Radar specialists brief commanders late into the night, explaining how German screens will react, where confusion will peak, how long the blindness will last. The first major test comes quietly. Bombers cross the coast. The aluminum strips flutter downward, invisible to the naked eye. On German radar screens, the effect is immediate and catastrophic. Returns explode across the scope, dozens, hundreds, of false targets blooming at once. Operators shout for clarification. Controllers issue contradictory orders. Night fighters are scrambled, then recalled, then scrambled again toward ghosts. By the time clarity returns, the bombers are already gone. Losses drop. Crews notice. Confidence grows. The air war tilts, not decisively, not yet, but enough to be felt by men who had once flown into darkness expecting death. None of this is visible to Heinrich Wenzel. He remains in British custody, moved between secure locations, questioned periodically but treated correctly. He is no longer a frightened prisoner, pulled from a radar hut at gunpoint. He is a living archive, consulted when details need confirmation. Sometimes, late at night, he hears bombers overhead and wonders if his words are guiding them safely through the dark, or guiding destruction toward cities he once called home. On the Normandy coast, Bruneville becomes a warning. German soldiers stationed there speak of the night in hushed tones, of parachutes blossoming out of nowhere, of silent men who struck with precision and vanished before dawn. The myth of absolute German control along the Atlantic wall cracks, just slightly. For the British Commandos, Operation Biting becomes legend. It proves that airborne raids can work, that intelligence can be seized, not just gathered, that courage, planning, and technical understanding can matter as much as divisions and fleets. Lieutenant John Frost will carry the lessons of Bruneville with him to later battles, to larger drops, fiercer fights, and moments where the margin for error is just as thin. But on that cold February night, none of them knew what the full impact would be. They only knew the feel of the wind on the cliff, the weight of a terrified German technician between them, and the certainty that the mission had to succeed, because failure meant the sky itself belonged to the enemy. History would later reduce Operation Biting to a few lines in textbooks. A raid, a radar, a prisoner taken. But wars do not turn on summaries. They turn on moments, on beaches under flares, on hands tearing wires from machines, on a single man who knows how the signals work and is taken alive into the dark.